This is Kentucky's Voice Radio, covering the latest state and local issues with Tom Fallbush, Bob Scott, and Jim Waters.
And welcome, everybody, to Kentucky's Voice. I'm your host for the day, Andrew Cooper-Ryder, and I thank you all so much for joining us here at Kentucky's Voice. We are Kentucky's source for conservative and constitutional news and analysis. And here we are, of course, listener supported. So if you'd like to help out the show, you'd like to help make sure that we keep bringing this to you every single day here live on 970 at 11 a.m. and also aired on WBNA 21. If you want to help out there, go ahead and text the word GIVE, G-I-V-E. Once again, that's GIVE, G-I-V-E, to 502-571-0970. That's also the number where if you want to communicate with the show, you want to give us your opinions, you can also text 502-571-0970. And today's show, we have quite a show prepared for you because, in case you missed the news, Jefferson County Public Schools is going broke. That's right. They have announced that if they don't start selling assets off, they will be insolvent. Jefferson County Public Schools, the financial department, in a meeting earlier last week, actually said out loud that if they continue with this behavior, if they continue spending how they're spending, JCPS will not exist anymore in 2 years. That's right. And so they've moved to go ahead and sell off some assets, do some other things. And so we'll be covering that meeting. Also, in the world of schools, Fayette County Public Schools has went ahead and improved a tentative budget. Surprise, surprise. It's lower than the budget they had before. Turns out they didn't actually need to raise the taxes there. That kind of started them off to this horrible situation that they're in. We also will be discussing, we've got a new candidate filing against Thomas Massie there in that Republican primary, but not too much fanfare. I haven't seen anybody really latching on to him. So we asked the question of, is that the AIPAC / Trump-ish world pick to run against Massie, or are they still out there searching for a candidate? And why are they having such a hard time finding a candidate? We'll just kind of discuss a little bit about that race. You may not like what I have to say on that, but it's going to give you the truth, of course. Alongside that, you also have Rand and Massie out doing some big tours right now. I believe today they were supposed to be in like 3-4 different cities. We'll talk about that. And then also, we'll have a few different, if we have time, in the Courier-Journal, there's a few opinion pieces there that I wanted to discuss and push back on. Because, of course, our media here, our Courier-Journal media here in Louisville, they'll publish if whatever kind of leftist dribble you want to put out there. They can do it. They got it. They'll publish it, hands down, no problems. They can do it. But if it's something conservative, they won't publish it. Trust me, I have tried myself to go ahead and get some things published with the Courier-Journal, and they won't do it. Other newspapers and even publications would do it, but the Courier-Journal would not publish it. They absolutely hate with a capital H, anything to do with conservative thoughts, real conservative thoughts. They'll have the quote unquote conservatives, people that call themselves Republicans but maybe aren't really. They'll have them write their articles and be apologetic for the Republican stance on something or chastising Republicans. They'll publish those quote unquote conservatives, if you want to call them that. But when you actually push back, they won't. So we're going to do that here. We're going to be pushing back here. But once again, if you like the reporting, you like listening to this here, the Andrew Cooper-Ryder Show is available to you as a standalone show as well. It's every Sunday at 6 p.m. right here on 970. You can also watch it if you just want to see my pretty little face. You can watch it Wednesdays at 11 o'clock. Wednesdays at 11 o'clock. So you can check that out there, the Andrew Cooper-Ryder Show. But we'll be back in a few short seconds, really, here on Kentucky's Voice. We just want to introduce you to the show today and ask you, hey, join into the conversation. Shoot us a text, 502-571-0970. We'll see you back here in a few short seconds. Your host for the day, Andrew Cooperwriter, bringing you the news, bringing you the analysis.
Now, back to Kentucky's Voice Radio, online at kyvoice.org.
And welcome back to Kentucky's Voice, your host for the day, Andrew Cooperwriter. I'm also the host of the Andrew Cooperwriter Show, a radio show, TV show, podcast you can catch right here on 970 and WBNA 21, 970 Sundays at 6 p.m. and Wednesdays you can watch on WBNA at 11. Now let's imagine for a second you run a $2 billion company. Let's imagine you're running a $2 billion organization, and you're not very good at your job to begin with. Let's pretend you build widgets. Okay, you build a widget, and well over half, actually closer to 75% of those widgets will come out of the factory unable to work at a proficient level. Would you say that's good, right? Would you say that's an acceptable result? Of course not. But that's what we have going on at JCPS. We have reading and math proficiency levels that legitimately would make you, make you feel pretty bad for the kids that they're pushing out there. But this is despite the fact that they have a almost $2 billion budget. And every year, they raise those taxes, the maximum allowed 4%. Let me tell you the results real quick. I'm sure you've heard them before, but proficient at least in reading. Here you go. 36% of elementary kids are at least proficient in reading in JCPS. That goes down to 32% being at least proficient in reading in middle school. And then in high school, that goes up just a tad to 35% proficient. So like I said, almost a 70% failure rate there, about 65% failure rate. When you go over to math, doesn't look that great either. Elementary schools, you have only 31% proficient in math. In middle school, 25%. In high school, you have 26% proficient in math. So right around 70% of the kids that are being pumped out of Jefferson County Public Schools are not even proficient in math or reading, despite the fact that they're spending this $2 billion a year. So you'd expect them to at least, be really good stewards. They must be banking a lot of cash, right? They must not be just wasting that money away. Being good stewards. I mean, if you're not getting a good result on the learning, that must mean you're not using all your resources. Well, if you thought that was the case, you would be mistaken, because at a board meeting here this past week, where Jefferson County Public Schools Board was faced with finding out some information for the first time, that they would need within the next year to sell off $188 million worth of assets. In this case, they're talking about, I believe, mainly stock holdings, those kinds of things, investment accounts that they earn interest on. They're going to have to sell that off, which is a problem, by the way. It's a problem because when you sell off assets that are earning you money, sure, that may solve a budget shortfall, but it puts your cash flow position even worse. So they're really just digging this hole even greater and deeper. But they found out last week that if they don't make cuts like over the next year, they will be needing to sell off $188 million worth of assets to make payroll, to pay their contractors. And if they continue spending in this way, the district will become insolvent, will no longer exist within 2 to 3 years. 2 to 3 years. And we got a clip here from the meeting. This is clip 1 there for you guys. There in the producer's booth. We got clip 1 here from the meeting. Let's go ahead and take a listen to as they told them this piece of information. Let's listen to that.
In December, our cash balances shoot up, and then we start spending it down until we reach the next valley, further be hurting our position. So this is what it looks like, and it's not pretty. So forecasting our revenues and expenses based on many different factors. The current trend lines are dropping very quickly. So we are currently forecasting that our cash will reach zero in October of 2026, meaning just over a year from now. Now, cash is how we pay our employees and our vendors. We do have some flexibility in October of 2026 to be able to continue paying our bills. And we would usually, the very first thing we would consider is by selling off our some investments in our portfolio. Once we start doing that, then we will be investing less, we'll be earning less interest income, meaning we will then further be hurting our position. However, when you extend beyond October of 2026, we still are going downward to where it becomes dangerous for us to be able to continue and onto the valley in October of 2027. That's the point at which the district will be in very serious trouble if we don't do something now, meaning something prior to January that's solidified in the January draft budget for the 26-27 school year. So at this point, I'd like to turn.
All right. For those of you that were watching that, I apologize for the quality of the video. You see, this drives me crazy, by the way, about all these, and I feel like they do it on purpose, the government entities and things, where they make it like they have horrible quality on their public meetings that they're airing, almost like to make it to where it's harder for people like me to grab videos of what they're saying and it look good to you without looking like it was filmed on a potato. In that case, the school board, what they do is when they air these, the Jefferson County Public School Board, at least when they air these meetings, so you have your computer screen, they have like 16 tiles, and they have every single school board member and every single person like with their own camera, but they don't like select like, oh, this guy's talking, let me make his screen bigger, because of course that would just make sense. And then to throw that on top, if they're presenting something, they'll throw something off to the side. And so it just creates absolutely horrible quality. I apologize, but I think it's important that you heard what he had to say, because he said by 2027, the district will be in serious, serious trouble unless something is done now. Now, you may ask what led to this. And what's funny is throughout this meeting, they proffered up some different suggestions, right? And some of these are jaw-dropping. I'm not kidding you. At one point during the school board meeting where JCPS is like, look, we have no money, one of the school board members has the audacity, I couldn't believe, my jaw dropped, had the audacity to suggest that because the school board members are not paid enough, they're not getting good enough quality of school board members on the board, therefore they're not making good financial decisions, and they should raise the pay of the school board members. So you have a school board going broke. That's like, look, in 2 years, we're going to be belly up. We need to sell off $108 million in assets, $188 million of assets. And a school board member's like, you know what, fix this? Raising our pay. It's like your company, this is exactly what like happened with the government bailouts, with all these banks getting bailed out by the government, and then they turn around and write bonus checks to the CEOs. They're like, well, yes, have we financially mismanaged the district? Perhaps. Have we mishandled $2 billion? Yeah, probably. Do we need to sell off $188 million of assets in order to make payroll? Yeah, we are. But you know what would have solved this? If you paid me more so I would care more. I wasn't going to care before, but if you pay me a couple extra grand a month, I might care enough to not lead us into this financial position. That's literally what they said. There's other things that were literally suggested during the school board meeting. At one point, one of the school board members asked, do we save money if we have more NTI days? they're sitting there talking about, well, we need to have a budget that prioritizes children, while they're talking about why they're spending so much extra, because they're trying to make, in a post-pandemic world, that's what they said, they got to make up ground in K through 12 education. And because of that, because they have to make up that ground, they have to spend more to educate the children. And then one of the suggestions by the school board member was, well, what if we just had more NTI days? Does that save us money? Should we just have more of those, put more kids on computers? Because, you know, we'd hate to have to cut, I don't know, central office pay or something else. There's a lot of things that came to the surface in this meeting that were almost throwaway lines that just blew my mind. But there's one particular moment where the financial office there admits to withholding information, important and pertinent, that's the same thing, information from the school board. So I'm going to play that for you. We're going to discuss that after this short break, because we need to figure out, how did JCPS get to the point where they're going insolvent? We're going to try to solve it here on Kentucky's Voice. You're listening to Andrew Cooperrider. We'll be back in a few short minutes.
Are you ready to stand for truth? Kentucky is at a crossroads, and we need voices that won't back down. This is your moment to rise, speak up, and be part of a movement that's changing the narrative in the Commonwealth. Kentucky's Voice is calling on bold citizen journalists, fearless editors, and those unafraid to speak truth in the public square. Volunteer, intern, contribute. Scan the QR code or visit kyvoice.org to join the fight. This is more than media. This is your moment. You are Kentucky's voice.
Now, back to Kentucky's Voice Radio, online at kyvoice.org.
And you're back here on Kentucky's Voice. Before the break, we were discussing this fiery electric school board meeting that happened here in Jefferson County Public Schools last week. And if you live in Louisville, this is incredibly important for you to hear about, because in that meeting, they announced that the district would need to start selling off assets in order to make payroll, $188 million worth. And if things don't change, the district will cease to exist, will become financially insolvent in 2 years. There's a lot of things people admitted to during the meeting. One of the most jaw-dropping moments to me, though, coming out of the financials office, is when they essentially admitted, not essentially, they did admit to withholding important information from the school board regarding financial decisions. This is a little bit longer of a clip. It's a few minutes long, but I think it's really important you hear this entire exchange, because I have never heard anybody full on admit to essentially committing fraud before. But here you go. Let's take a listen to that.
So am I correct to hear you say that you were directed to mislead the board in your narrativizing of the financial position?
No, sir. What I would say is that the working budget that was provided to you, I'll give an example. In the tentative budget for last spring, part of that was a division by division breakdown of the increases of our org charts. Very specific, every division and how much they've had org charts over the last increases over the last 3 years. Increases beyond what the trade versus gain was. That table was removed. I tried to incorporate that data.
So why was the table removed? That's pertinent information.
It was in discussions. It was not viewed as pertinent and relevant, and maybe data that would be useful for creating for throwing out allegations about JCPS more so than pertinent, relevant data.
But isn't that deception?
I would call it a judgment.
You call it
so the document presented was our document, and the decision to remove that was obviously not. If we didn't believe in having that in there, we wouldn't have had it in there to begin with. But ultimately, there are certain strategic decisions that we have to follow the district lens on.
This can be fixed. It will be fixed under Dr. Yearwood's leadership. He's inspiring. He inspires me every time I meet with him. But here's the thing. We can't keep doing what we've always done and expect to be able to survive the way we have.
And we can't keep deleting pertinent information or information that does not present the full picture of what the board has to weigh and what the board has to decide. And so I would just request that moving forward, that that the board be respected enough to receive all of the pertinent information about every decision that is placed before this board. If it needs to be embargoed, we do have a mechanism for that. But the board needs to be presented with all of the requisite information so that we can make a well-rounded decision for the good of this district. I don't think any of us, I know Mr. Craig and I, who have been here for almost 8 years, certainly we've done, we're proud of the work that this district has done, but this is the first time that I'm hearing anything about selling assets.
I tell you what, that board member is a little calmer about finding out that information than I'd be, because I'd immediately said, excuse me, police, arrest that man. Arrest that man right there, who just admitted essentially to committing a type of fraud here. I mean, listen to the document he held back as he described it, okay? So you got a district, you got a school board that's finding out for the first time they're going to have to sell off assets, $188 million worth of interest-earning assets in order to make payroll, pay their bills, pay their contractors. They're going to have to sell it off, putting them in a worse cash flow position due to decisions that they've made. And so they say, well, this is news to us. We wouldn't have made those decisions if you'd shared with us that the outcome of that would have been we have to sell off $188 million worth of assets. Obviously, sure, we're kind of stupid and dumb, and yeah, we'll believe you. I mean, you know, we should never believe these people to begin with, but we're dumb enough to do that. But we're not so stupid that if you came to us in plain English and said, you're going to have to sell off $188 million of assets if you take yes on this vote, we would do it. But in this case, that's exactly what they're saying. They're saying, look, you never told us about it. And he says, well, you know, sometimes we don't give you certain information. And the information he admits to hiding from them is information regarding the org chart when it came to pay increase information, based upon what I was able to glean from what he said. Basically, last year in spring, they were considering an increase of pay for the across the board, across the district. Okay? And within that, they looked at the organizational chart and the pay increases that have occurred over the last several years, where some district or some departments and people have gotten more pay increases than others. And so while they were looking at they mentioned it earlier on, the COLA increase, the cost of living adjustment increase to the pay, there was a chart created that they thought might be important to the board regarding who has gotten a pay increase over the past years and who hasn't. Which, you know, especially if you're in a position where you're selling off assets, you might look at it and say, look, this guy's gotten a 10% pay increase over the last 2 years. Meanwhile, this teacher of math hasn't gotten a pay increase. Let's increase their pay maybe 6% and increase this guy's pay 0 because he's gotten a 10% increase. Makes sense. But then they admit, so they created this chart because they thought it would be useful. But then they decided, after looking at the results of the chart, to not share that information with the board because they were worried how it would be used against JCPS, meaning that they created the information, they saw the outcome of it, they realized that it looked bad because most likely it showed, people in central office and administrators getting massive pay increases, while our teachers and people who are actually in charge of educating our children here in Jefferson County Public Schools were getting nothing or getting far less. And they were worried that would cause issues for them. So they decided not to share the information with the board. So the board handed out raises to people that otherwise it maybe wouldn't have. That's the entire picture, what I'm gleaming, reading between the lines, because they're not going to say that. But that's the picture that they're painting. And we wonder how the district ended up in a position that they had to sell off $188 million of assets, and if they don't do something drastic, make drastic cuts, within 2 to 3 years, Jefferson County Public Schools will cease to exist. It will become insolvent. It will be unable to pay its bills. Those are the exact words they used. And we wonder how it happened when you have a financial leadership team that sits there and admits to hiding the information. What do they call it? They say, well, it's a judgment call. Imagine coming home to your wife or husband and saying, hey, I want to buy a new car. And you withhold from them that, you maybe have a looming bill of $5,000 coming. And you say, I want to buy a new car. I kind of need one. I took it to the shop. They said something was wrong with it. I need a new car. And so you guys decide to buy a new car. And then your husband or wife, significant other, finds out that the issue with your car was it needed new rotors. The engine wasn't going to blow up. It just needed new rotors. And they say, why didn't you share that? We would have just fixed that car, saved us so much money. And we've got this $5,000 bill pending. And you say, well, it was a judgment call. Meaning, I didn't want to share the information with you because it would lead you to make a decision that I didn't want you to make. That is fraudulent. They should be held accountable for that. They should lose their jobs. You're listening to Kentucky's Voice. This is Andrew Cooper-Ryder. We'll be back in a few.
Now, back to Kentucky's Voice Radio, online at kyvoice.org.
And welcome back to Kentucky's Voice. I'm your host for the day, Andrew Cooper-Ryder. Thank y'all so much for joining. I'm also the host of the Andrew Cooper-Ryder Show. If you want to check that out, you can listen to that right here on 970, Sundays at 6 p.m. You can also check it out on WBNA 21, Wednesdays at 11. You can also head over to theandrewshow.com. Once again, that's theandrewshow.com, and you can learn more about my own show there. But I'm your host for the day here on Kentucky's Voice. I host about once a week, normally Tuesdays, Wednesdays or so. So if you all just like hearing me around this time, just tune in Tuesdays or Wednesdays. If you hear my voice, stay on. If you hear somebody else, still stay on. They're probably pretty good. But anyways, so in the last segment, I was talking about JCPS I've just kind of this show, I've been talking about JCPS because it's big news. Jefferson County Public Schools is going bankrupt. They have to sell off assets to make payroll. They're going to go bankrupt unless they make drastic cuts. You have budget people admitting, in the last segment we played the video, admitting to hiding information from the board because they didn't want it to become public. They didn't want it to be used against them. And they were worried that the board would come out to the wrong conclusion. And that's what they admitted to. Imagine what they're doing that they don't want you to know about and feel very uncomfortable even beginning to list off in a setting like that. It's kind of crazy when you think about it. But here's the real kicker. Here's just a little icing on a cake. Okay, so we've gone through it. District floundering, board not told about this. They're admitting this is the first time they're hearing about selling off assets. You got financial people admitting to hiding information, all that together. Would you say that is a financially transparent school system? Would you? Well, if you're a member of the Government Finance Officers Association of the United States and Canada, that's called GFOA, you would say that. This is a press release from JCPS dated July 17th, 2025. Jefferson County Public Schools is committed to financial transparency, has earned the district a national award for the 18th year in a row. The Government Finance Officers Association of the United States and Canada awarded the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting to the Jefferson County Board of Education for its annual comprehensive financial report for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2024. JCPS has a long history of financial transparency, having won the same award every year since 2007, said JCPS Chief Financial Officer Eddie Munz. By the way, Munz was that guy admitting to hiding information from the board. And just a few months earlier, he's like, oh, well, we're very transparent. We win awards for how transparent we are. Don't look at the information we've hidden from the board. Don't look at the information that we won't share with the public. Don't look at the reports that we have created that we've held back because we're worried some people might come to the wrong conclusions. We are a very financially transparent board. Don't you see this here award we have? Absolutely ridiculous. But hey, what do you expect? What do you expect? I mean, the government has set the bar so low with their financial behaviors. They have districts going bankrupt, board members finding out about it for the first time, them admitting to hiding information, and they're over here winning awards for financial transparency. Oh my gosh. Speaking of financial issues here, the state of Kentucky approved a contract here. This was about 2 weeks ago. They approved a contract. So this goes through the Government Contract Review Committee. So this is a legislative committee, but they're out of session. So what happens is every time the government has a contract they're putting forward, it has to be quote unquote approved by the legislature. They can decide to hear on it or just pass it on through. And if they do decide to hear on it and they vote against the contract, it then can be overcome by the Beshear administration. They get to quote unquote veto. Where legislature is not in session, the committee can't do anything beyond that at that moment. But as I've talked about at length on my show, on this show, there are other things they could be doing when they come into session that makes it clear. They don't need a new law or anything else, but if they just punish those departments who put forward the contracts that otherwise they take issue with after they've told them no, and then they still put them forward, if they bothered to deal with them properly, well, they wouldn't keep doing it. But so that committee did approve, though, this contract here. It approved Letcher County Fiscal Court to spend $398,456 per house to build 46 homes in Letcher County. So according to Realtor.com, the median list price for a home in Letcher County is $177,000. And here the state is spending $400,000 a home for, and these aren't mansions either. These are, 2-bedroom, 3-bath, starter home style, ranch home style homes. And they're spending $400,000 a home on building. The contract is for a total of $18,329,000 to build 46 single family homes. Now, before we dig into whether or not we think the government should be building homes, it does lead to the question of why are they spending $400,000 a home in a place where a similar home sells for $177,000? And so I posted about that on social media, and I get some interesting feedback. It's always interesting when I post about the home contracts, because this isn't the only time we've seen this. We've seen this Government Contract Review Committee. We've seen the Beshear administration over the past 6 months or so approving contracts to do things like build duplexes at a cost of $300,000 a side. So $600,000 total for one duplex. And we're seeing this constantly high, very expensive home building price. Now, people will tell me, Andrew, that's not too expensive. First off, maybe where you have a high amount of demand, like here in Louisville, that maybe wouldn't be that expensive for a home I described, a new construction home. But when you go out into areas of Kentucky, rural areas of Kentucky, and in areas that don't have necessarily land costs that are so expensive, you will find situations where homes are a lot less expensive. You'll find $200,000-$300,000 homes all day long, new construction, 2-3 bathroom, 2.5 bathroom, 3-4 bedroom homes for that $300,000 to $400,000 mark. I know of neighborhoods right now in like Georgetown, for an example, that are building right around that mark. Now, people will say, look, new construction is just more expensive than buying a home. You can't compare buying a home that's put onto the market to a new construction home. Those prices aren't comparable. And to those people, I say, you are mistaken. That is absolutely comparable. This is how the market works. You've seen this with cars. When new car prices go up, guess what happens to used car prices? They go up as well. And homes, by the way, don't depreciate in value like a new car does. The minute you buy it, depreciates in value. That doesn't happen. So if a home, if there is demand for housing in an area, the homes in that area will sell for more. And if you can build a new home and sell it for that amount of money, people will build new homes and sell them. If, however, there's no demand, so that's why they're not building new homes, and that's why you can't compare it to homes that are on the market and new homes, I would ask the question, then why are you building the homes? If demand is so low that a non-new construction home of similar size and quality, like let's say it's been refurbished and everything else, is coming in at, let's say, half the price is the cost of you to build it new, that should tell you there isn't a lot of demand for housing in that area, which would lead to the question of, why is our government spending $18.3 million then building houses in places where there is no demand for houses? Huh? Importantly, too, how are they going to pay for these houses? The reason why there's no demand is because there's not a lot of jobs in the area. And I get it. You're talking about homes that have been destroyed from the flood. That's the reason why they're doing this. They're dealing with homes that have been destroyed by floods, and they're building these homes out of floodplains and then trying to give them with according to the contract I read, it looks like it'll be a low-cost mortgage, a lower-price mortgage that to the would-be buyers of the home. But how are they going to pay the mortgage? How are they going to take care of a $400,000 house? How are they going to afford the maintenance and the care of this home if they can't afford the home to begin with because they don't have jobs in the area? Like, seriously. And I get it. We should house people. I'm not saying we shouldn't house people per se. I'm not saying that when times of natural disaster, the government doesn't have a role to play of some sort. What I am saying, though, is why is the government in the job of building houses, then handing them off, loaning them out to people? Because it should be the free market at work there. And if there's no demand in the area, they're wasting your tax dollars on this. How much of that $18.3 million do you think is actually going to be paid back to the government? How many of those people are going to be able to pay their loans? How many people are you signing up for a debt they'll never be able to afford? None of these questions were asked by our so-called Republican legislative committee here either. Those would be, if you're a fiscal conservative, before you're signing off on all these homes, and I get it, because when I post about this, I see comments from people all the time. What do? You hate the poor? You don't want them to be in houses? Whether you think we should be building housing for the poor or not, you should agree that we should build as many houses as possible for the money that we've been given. And at $400,000 a home in Letcher County for homes that will be less than 2,000 square feet with at the most 2 bathrooms, 3 bedrooms, we're not using our money properly. Well, if you want to join in the conversation, text us 502-571-0970. I'll be answering those texts after this short break, 502-571-0970. I'm Andrew Cooperrider. Shoot us the text, join into the conversation. We'll be back in a few short minutes.
Kentucky's Voice is your home for real news, real people, and real answers. But we can't do it without you. Your financial support helps us bring truth to the forefront, hold leaders accountable, and give a voice to the people of the Commonwealth. Give online at kyvoice.org or text KYVoice to 53555. Every gift makes a difference. Stand with us. Speak up. Stay strong. You.
Now, back to Kentucky's Voice Radio, online at kyvoice.org.
And welcome back to this final segment of the Andrew Cooper Writer Show. Your host for the day has been me. Or not, I'm not. Sorry, this isn't Andrew Cooper Show. This is Kentucky's Voice. I host the Andrew Cooper Writer Show here on 970, Sundays at 6 p.m. But this is Kentucky's Voice, and I'm your host here on Kentucky's Voice, Andrew Cooper Writer. I'm sorry. You know, when you host a few different shows, you get into a groove. So I did have a text come in that I wanted to talk about. Now, if you want to join into the conversation, you can text us 502-571-0970. Once again, that's 502-571-0970. And the text came in, and this is regarding my first two segments has been about Jefferson County Public Schools, of course, going bankrupt, admitting to now they're going to have to sell off assets, $188 million worth to make payroll, to make contractors. They're going to have to make deep cuts. And if nothing changes, they will be insolvent in 2 years. And so a text came in, and the board during this, in this clip I played, said they were unaware. This is the first they're hearing about selling off assets. They're unaware. And the text came in that says, are we sure the entire JCPS board was unaware? And I don't know. I think perhaps they were. There may have been a person or two that's smart enough on the board to have seen the reports and saw what was coming, right? But understand how this works, right? So they make this budget for the year, and they come in and they say it's balanced, or maybe it's not, but it's because we're paying for these extras that you voted on. They're like, well, we want to keep doing that. And then they kind of don't talk about the financial situation exactly in the greater concept. And then they come in and it's like a death by 1,000 cuts. Let's spend $1 million here, $1 million there. So we're covering, they're $188 million short. They're talking about how did we get here? Well, they start talking about things that they voted on individually. This was in the meeting. They were talking about things they voted on individually as standalone things that started to add into it. Now, of course, they had the COLA and the increase of teacher pay and everything else. Okay. But they started talking about things like, well, we spent $5 million on metal detectors. Well, we've spent $10 million that was unexpected on school security that, of course, we want to keep. We spent $30 million on the equity fund. That's a real thing. The equity fund that is to help, kids across the board catch up and be on an equal playing field or something. But, of course, they say they don't regret spending that at all. They admit to spending an extra $20 million on ESL, English as a second language groups, and helping people who can't speak English. And these were all little individual groups. These are all individual votes that occurred separately at separate meetings, where it's 10 million here, 15 million there, 20 million there. And over the course of the year, it's added up to the point, over the course of several years of doing this, it's added up to the point that they're now negative $188 million in cash flow here in a year, unless they start cutting some things. But it's just kind of imagine this. Imagine you create a budget to start off the month in your household, and you have $500 of wiggle room, and you go out to eat maybe this one time here once a week. And I'm going to go out to eat and spend $100 on dinner with my family. And then I'm going to spend, you know what? We had an extra $500. Let's go ahead and spend $100 going out to this play or movie or whatever, and going out for this evening. Oh, well, we had an extra $500. Let's spend $50 on this new shirt or clothes or whatever. And over the course of a month, you keep thinking to yourself, I have an extra $500. And then when you add it all up, you spent $1,500, which is more than that $500 of wiggle room you had. But you weren't keeping a running total, and until all your bills were due at the end of the month, and suddenly now you're doing the math and you realize your account's going to be negative $1,000, instead of positive 500, you realize the mistake you've made. I think mainly that's what's gone on. Now, also your text, polio left in the polio. Is that, I think that's how you say his name, polio. Polio left in the nick of time. That is right. That is the other thing. This district is clearly in a financial position. And yet this guy leaves. They spent what, like $7-8 grand on a billboard thanking him for his service to the district, because being paid hundreds of thousands of dollars a year wasn't enough. And he gets out, and now suddenly the district's in trouble. So that's text for the day. If you wanted to join in, you could have texted us 502-571-0970. I'm not saying there's not still time, but the chances that I end up getting to the message today is slim, but you can still text. Maybe somebody will deal with it tomorrow. Or we can cover that there. But changing it up now a little bit. I know I said I would cover like a whole bunch of different other things that I'm not going to have time to cover. I wanted to dig into the Thomas Massie getting a new opponent. Doesn't really seem to be the person that they're going to throw all their weight behind to try to get them done, which kind of helps them out. The more people that jump in, the better, right? Because the more people that jump in, if you're somebody who wants to see Thomas Massie win, the better for Massie. The more people that jump in, it cuts up more of that just anti-Massie vote compared to one person being in there. Don't really have time, because I think that's a really nuanced conversation when it comes to Thomas Massie. So I did want to talk about, though, this opinion article that was published in the Courier-Journal, because it just kind of shows you. I know we've talked a lot about the left being violent and awful and everything else over the past week or so on the show, but I just wanted to talk a little bit more about the way they view the role of government and you in their lives. And I think it says a lot. So this is a letter to the editor that's from a transgender woman. So that's a dude. Just be clear. So that's a dude. And I will reference that several times, that this is a man talking. Okay. Just be clear. Okay. So the title is Kentucky's anti-trans Medicaid legislation pushed me away from my Louisville home. Now I read that and I was immediately like, whoa here. So anti-trans Medicaid legislation. Now there was a big kerfuffle when this passed. In fact, Bashir was trying to not enforce it, even claiming he needed money to not enforce something. It was so strange. That's a different conversation that is much longer than the 5 minutes I have left today. But anyways, so this bill passed to say you can't spend Medicaid dollars on gender transition surgeries and drugs. Simply put, it's the same kind of thing of abortions, right? For a long time, we had I believe it was called the Hyde Amendment. Somebody can correct me, but I think it's called the Hyde Amendment, that said that while you may agree or disagree with abortion or whatever else, one thing we will agree upon is that we will not take people's tax dollars and fund abortion. We recognize it's a divisive topic. We recognize that this group of people have a big moral issue with it. They believe it's evil. They think it's wrong. It's morally repugnant, and it's murder. So therefore, we won't. The least we could do is not take their money and spend it on it. And in much the same way, it's kind of like the same thing for the transgender side of things. Yes, we find it immoral, wrong. I think it's wrong that these people are clearly mentally ill, and we're treating them by chopping off body parts and pumping them full of drugs from that change their gender, instead of dealing with the fact that they are somebody who just in their mental mindset hates their bodies. But at least we could do, if they're going to have the freedom to do that, at least what we could do is just not make you pay for it. And so here in Kentucky, we passed a law this last session saying Medicaid will not pay for it. Now, to be clear, Medicaid means you're not over the age of 65 or whatever Medicare is. I should know. I talk about state politics. Cut me a break on some of the federal regulation things, okay? But Medicaid is for people who qualify due to an income reason, generally speaking. And so this guy who's transitioning to a woman admits in the title of this article that he has been using your money to fulfill his creepy, weird sexual desire, autogynephilia, whatever weirdo fantasy of being a woman. he's been taking your money to do it and admitting to using your money to doing it, and so committed to it and so incapable of paying for these things himself that he's now left Kentucky to a state that would allow Medicaid, tax dollars to pay for his treatments. So anyways, here, this is the article. Starts off, I'm a native daughter of Kentucky. Now, you're a native son. You're a native son, not a daughter. Not a daughter. Anyways, Louisville's where I spent my days learning and growing into the woman I am today. Well, that's an attack on Louisville right there. He's really throwing some shade there on Kentucky. If Louisville, or shade on Louisville specifically, if it was because of Louisville and living in Louisville that you turned into a man who's mentally ill and thinks he's a woman, that's an attack on Louisville. I'd be offended if you're a Louisvillian. What is the word here? Louisvillian, whatever. If you're somebody who lives in Louisville, somebody text me that 502-571-0970. Let me know what the plural is for people who live in Louisville. A Louisvite? I don't know. Anyways, but if you're somebody who does live in Louisville, you now know that I would be offended that this happened. But anyways, going back to the article, since my childhood, I have fled from my old Kentucky home to start my college education elsewhere. It seemed Kentucky wanted me gone, considering the actions of Kentucky legislature, so this is not a difficult decision. The specific bill I'm referring to is House Bill 495, which prevents Medicaid from being used to cover medical costs for medications used to help one transition from one sex to the other, cutting off many from being able to access this vital health care while residing in Kentucky. Going back to the kerfuffle, okay? We were told that this wasn't happening. When the Kentucky legislature this past session tried to pass this bill and did pass this bill, one of the attacks on them from the Beshear administration, from the liberal media was, why are you wasting our time with this? This isn't even happening. And yet, after the fact, what do we find out? Oh, it was happening. And it's happening enough and an awful lot that this dude who's mentally ill has left this state over it. Good riddance. You can leave. Go. Shoo. But anyways, has left the state over it. And apparently, he says that they're cutting off many from being able to access this quote-unquote vital health care. I say good riddance. I say shoo, get out of here. We don't want you. Well, this has been Kentucky's Voice. I'm Andrew Cooprider, your host for the day. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Till tomorrow, we'll be seeing you.